The Constitution mandates in Article 1, Section 5, Paragraph 3, that written records be kept of what goes on in Congress. The founders required this because they wanted government open, accessible, and accountable to the people. Within the congressional records, you or I at any time can read what our elected officials are doing and saying, or not doing and not saying, and then hold them accountable. Every debate and every vote which has taken place in Congress from 1774 to the present is recorded in these public records. And it is because of these records that we know exactly what happened when Congress moved into this building. According to the records for late November of 1800, Congress spent the first few weeks organizing the rooms, the committees, their locations, etc. And then, in the first week of December 1800, Congress made an interesting decision. What was that decision? Congress decided that the Capitol building would also serve as a church building. The U.S. Capitol, this building, became a church. The use of this building as a church building is confirmed not only by the records of Congress, but also by the diaries of those who served in Congress at the time. For example, when John Quincy Adams was a U.S. Senator in 1803, he recorded in his diary for October the 30th, attended public service at the Capitol, where Mr. Rattoon, an Episcopalian clergyman from Baltimore, preached a sermon. The week before, he had written, "Religious service is usually performed on Sundays at the Treasury office and at the Capitol. I went both forenoon and afternoon to the Treasury." Very few realize that this building, as well as other government buildings, served as church buildings, but indeed such was the case.
In modern politics, the term separation of church and state is most commonly used to ban acts of faith in the public arena. But a closer look into history reveals the intentions of this phrase to be just the opposite. How then has our history been redefined and rewritten? Discover our nation's godly history in the American Heritage series. America, this is your heritage.
Dave, what I think you have just done is given me information about what I thought I knew about the term separation of church and state, and spun the term separation of church and state literally 180 degrees from the original intent of its framers.
Or it was state, you stay out of our affairs. Yeah. Get out of our face.
Let me show you how corrupt the interpretation has become. Because the First Amendment to the Constitution is very simple. It says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Now, if we don't understand that, we go to the records of Congress. That means Congress cannot establish a federal denomination. They can't make us all Baptists, Presbyterians, or anything else. And Congress can't do anything to impede religious expression. That was their goal. You stay out of regulating people's religious expressions, and you don't set up a federal church. Now, that's what it meant. And so from the time that the First Amendment was ratified in 1791, all the way until 1947, that's what the First Amendment meant. But in 1947, the U.S. Supreme Court said, we need to change this a little bit. They said Jefferson used separation of church and state to protect the free exercise of religion. We think he applied it to the wrong clause. Instead of keeping the government out, we need to apply separation of church and state to government expressions. And so what we need to do now is stop religious activities in public. So they came up with what's called the establishment test in 1947. Then we get to a number of cases coming to the court that deal with religious expression. And in those cases at the court said, you know, we've got so many cases, we better erect a new standard so you understand what's constitutional religion. And the case 1971 called Lemon versus Kurtzman, they came out with a three-pronged test. It's called the Lemon test because it came out of the case Lemon versus Kurtzman. It says if you want a religious activity to be constitutional, here's what you have to do. They said the only way that a public religious expression is going to be constitutional is if the primary purpose of that public religious expression is secular. Now, wait a minute. That's completely oxymoronic. Right. There's no way you can prove that the primary purpose of prayer is secular. There's no way you can prove the primary purpose of the display of a nativity scene is secular. There's no way you can prove that the primary purpose of saying under God in the pledge is secular. You can't do it. And so now we lose every case on religious expression because of the Lemon test, which says unless religion has a secular primary purpose, you can't do it. Well, that was 1971. So then we move along to 1985, And in a case in 1985, the court came up with a new test for the First Amendment. It's called the endorsement test. And they said, you know, if it looks like the government is even friendly to religion, that's unconstitutional. And so now they have to appear to be hostile. So anytime religion pops up, they go, oh no, we can't do that. And that's why you can't have a student individually say something religious at a graduation.
Wow.
That's why you can't have a city councilman say something religious to open a city council, because that might look like government's being friendly to religion. That's the endorsement test. And the final and the most absurd test was given in 1992, and the Supreme Court calls it the outsider test. And the outsider test says, you know, if you're part of a religious minority, like if you're an atheist, only 6% of America doesn't believe in God, so if you're in that religious minority, and you see somebody else doing a religious activity in the majority that makes you feel like an outsider, we'll make them all stop so that you won't feel like an outsider. So as you look across the cases, we had several dozen cases on the Ten Commandments in America, Ten Commandments displays. The people who sued in those cases, you'll find the same phrase in every one of them. They said, you know, I was walking down the sidewalk and I looked over at the Capitol and I saw that monument of the Ten Commandments, and when I saw that I felt like an outsider in my own nation. And so the court stepped in and say, all right, take out the Ten Commandments, you can't feel like... Well, how about the 94% who don't feel like outsiders?
Right.
And by the way, if the 94% say, I feel like an outsider when it's gone, they say, oh, you're in the majority, you don't count. This only works if you're in a religious minority. So now separation church and state means that it has to be secular, government can't appear to be friendly toward religion, and if religious expression of somebody individually makes you feel uncomfortable, we'll make them all stop. That's completely reversed from the original separation that meant government, don't stop a religious expression. It's not your business to tell us what religious expressions are supposed to occur. What a reversal of separation church and state just in the last 50 years.
For more information on the American Heritage series, or to find books and other resources, visit wallbuilders.com. Through the American Heritage series, renowned historian David Barton communicates our nation's forgotten, godly foundations and encourages us to once again view history through a truthful lens. For only when we recognize and embrace God's hand in our history can America become all that it was intended to be. Through Wallbuilders, historian David Barton seeks to rebuild the walls of America's unique religious, moral, and constitutional heritage by educating the public and encouraging people of faith to become active in strengthening America's great foundations. For more information on how you can become involved, visit wallbuilders.com.